Hello students, Mr. Yun here with Chapter 21, Lesson 2. It's called Inventions Change Society. So today's lesson is a fun lesson, about inventions. It's especially exciting when you take the example of history and extrapolate it to today. So take that idea, put it in today's context, and here's what I mean. A lot of inventions were created in the late 1800s, such as the automobile or the telephone, but didn't go mainstream for a couple of decades. So what has been invented this year, or last year maybe, that are super cool that you've heard about, that might go mainstream? It might be normal things in a few decades, just like things that were invented in the 1800s. By 1920, everyone had them. So will drones deliver the mail in the 2020s? Like the Amazon drone? Will all your mail come by drone? Will we all have self-driving cars soon? How about people with disabilities? Will we have robotic body parts soon? Bionic parts? Cyborgs? Are these all things that can happen? These were the level of change that happened in the early 1900s with all these inventions. So it's exciting to think about today and comparing it to the changes back then. So the telegraph, invented by Samuel Morse. I swear we've talked about this before, but it might have been my other class. The telegraph was invented by Samuel Morse in the 1830s, and it rapidly changed how Americans communicated. Morse code used electricity to send a series of dots and dashes across a wire, and these were translated into letters. Everybody knows, SOS is dash, 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 dot, 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 dash, 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 and that of course means that you need help. Communication, with the invention and the advent of this Morse code system and the telegraph system, communication went from weeks or days to almost instant, as long as there was a telegraph wire. So instead of, say, the president sending a letter to the governor of, say, Florida, and it taking as long as it takes for a rider to get there, or even a train to carry the message, if there was a telegraph wire from Washington, D.C., all the way down to Florida, instant communication. Now, Morse actually sent his first message in 1844 from Baltimore to Washington, D.C. They aren't very far apart. They're like a 45-minute drive apart. But by 1860, there were thousands of miles of telegraph line. The telegraph was widely used during the Civil War. That's how Lincoln got a lot of news from the war front. All right, the telegraph was used by shopkeepers to order more goods. Businessmen made deals. They ordered stuff. The government, of course, as I just mentioned, used the telegraph wires. And even normal folk could send messages on the telegraph. But you needed telegraph operators. It wasn't like they were sending the telegraphs. You take a message to a telegraph operator, they would send it to another telegraph operator. After several failed attempts, Cyrus Field connected the U.S. to Europe by cable, and now telegraph messages could be sent overseas. That was in 1866. You can see they picked the shortest point between North America and Europe, which is between Newfoundland, and that looks like somewhere floating in the UK. So, moving on to the telephone, which is sort of like the newer version of the telegraph. Alexander Graham Bell was an educated Scottish man that moved to the United States as a young adult. In 1876, he invented the telephone, which translated, as we know, not electrical signals, but actual voices. With his new invention, he created the Bell Telephone Company to basically administer and serve this telephone service. By the 1890s, he had already sold hundreds of thousands of phones. His first clients were businesses. Businesses used phones at first to talk to each other, physically talk to each other, instead of having to go through a telegraph messenger and all that stuff. So businesses were first, but before long, phones were showing up in people's homes as well. Here he is with his first telephone. "Watson, come here, I want a root beer." That's not actually what he said. I think he actually said, it's in your book, I think he said, "Watson, come here, I need you," because he spilled acid on his lap. Alright, inventions galore. Between 1860 and 1890, the government granted more than 400,000 patents. What is a patent? A patent is a license. It's like a legal right to an idea, and only you may use it for a period of time. For example, if I invent a milk that does not make your cereal soggy, and I call it Magic Moo Juice, and I go ahead and apply for a patent, that means that no one else can copy my idea and make Magic Moo Juice too. I have that right for a certain period of time. I basically have the Moo Juice, the Magic Moo Juice market cornered for a number of years before any competitors can use the same idea to make the same product. That is what a patent is. So generally hear about patents with new inventions. Now some inventions that came out in this in time of invention that are actually memorable, because like 400,000 patents were given, not all of them are very memorable. Some that were more memorable would be that typewriter. The first calculator was like called the adding machine. It wasn't called a calculator yet. It's pictured there below, as well as the Kodak box camera. Oh, and don't forget the first vacuum cleaner. So that's good. So imagine you're doing PSSAs and you all had adding machines to help you with the math portion. Looks big. Alright, this brings us to the Wizard of Menlo Park. Thomas Alva Edison was a little hard of hearing. Couldn't hear real great. And his teachers thought he was dumb because he couldn't hear. Now his mom took him out of public school because the teacher didn't think much of him. And basically homeschooled him. So like, hey, too bad there was no PAUX. He didn't like his school. He could have come to PAUX. We wouldn't be around for another 100 years. So he was homeschooled by his mommy. Little Edison really loved science, and his mom even let him put up a little chemistry lab in the basement. It's pretty cute. There's Professor Bunsen Beaker, or what I think of when I think of scientists. Alright, in his 20s, Edison decided he wanted to be a professional inventor, and he opened up a lab in Menlo Park, New Jersey. That's why they call him the Wizard of Menlo Park, because big inventions came out of his lab, like the phonograph, which recorded voices, sort of like the first voice recorder. The motion picture projector, so like the movie theater stuff. That's good. The battery. And his biggest invention was the thought bubble. No, the light bulb. Ding, ding, ding. He figured out how to make a good light bulb in 1889. It took him a really long time to figure out what to make this part. The part that would light up when you put a current through it, but also not burn. So it had to last. In 1882, he built the first power plant in New York City, because now you have light bulbs that run electricity, but you need a power plant to supply the power, and those haven't been invented yet. So he made the first power plant in New York City. He supplied power to 82 buildings. George Westinghouse. Westinghouse is a big name here in Pittsburgh. He improved on Edison's idea by creating transformers, which could send electricity further for less money. Soon electricity powered streetcars, factories, streetlights, and lamps throughout the country. So electricity takes off, as do light bulbs and other electric things. See, these are transformers. They change power output. These are also transformers, but were not invented by George Westinghouse. There are a number of African American inventors that we want to talk about real quick. For example, Louis Latimer worked for Thomas Edison and created a better wire for use in the light bulb, so found a better filament for them. Granville Woods invented an oiling machine and improved the brakes on locomotives, on choo-choo trains, so that's pretty useful. Trains are pretty important still. Jan Matt Zeliger invented a shoemaking machine that revolutionized the shoemaking industry. I was looking for like a big conveyor belt like machine, and I googled it and I ended up with this. So looks a little crazy, but man, it does the job. And it was big. It was big. Alright. Henry Ford. He did not invent the automobile or the combustion engine. He was an engineer in Detroit, and he wanted to make a car that everyone could afford, and it lasted a lifetime. So a quality product that was affordable. In 1902, he started his own automaking company in Detroit, Michigan. He sat down with one of his workers, Charles Sorensen, and they designed the legendary Model T automobile. People think the Model T is the first car. Not true. but it is sort of the first mainstream car. Now in 1908, Ford introduced the Model T to the world. It was a good selling car. It sold 15 million units in the United States and 1 million units overseas. Model Ts on the road accounted for half the cars in the world. But the car was made cheaper by the process in which it was created. Process invented by Ford himself. So he didn't invent the car, but what he did invent was the assembly line. Now in an assembly line you have a line of workers that all do one part of assembly, which is very efficient. Much more efficient than, say, 4 guys building a car from scratch. This mass production process was copied by other manufacturers, and so all kinds of products were cheaper and numerous. It would be like, imagine this is something that needs to be manufactured. I'm taking off all the lids. And if it were more complicated, it'd be a better example, but this will work. So instead of me going here, and going, alright, I gotta put this on, I gotta put this part here, I gotta put this part here, I gotta think about it, I gotta line up the colors. Okay, that's kind of how it was done. In the assembly line process, I'm doing one part. So maybe I do the yellow part, and here comes one. Oh, put the yellow on that. It gets passed on to the next guy. I get another one. I've got a whole can of yellow here, and it just goes faster and faster. And then you don't really need to have any skill. You only need to be able to do one thing. So one guy put on the front right tire, and then maybe the next station another guy would put on the front left tire, and then the next person would drill the seat in. And that's how the process worked. It's not good if you don't need to sell a lot of a product, but he was mass producing them. So this was a very efficient process, and it's still in use today. Now it's like robots doing it. So that's what Henry Ford did. He made the assembly line. Now, quickly, where are we on time? 12 minutes. The first airplane. Wilbur and Orville Wright didn't actually invent the airplane. It's hard to say who had the first working airplane. Like Samuel Langley had an operational model airplane that ran on steam power in 1896. Then again, Leonardo da Vinci had schematics hundreds of years before that for flying machines. Now, the Wright brothers owned a bicycle shop, and they were building gliders in between like 1900 and 1902. 1903, they finally get around to slapping an engine on it, and they go ahead to test their first airplane in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. They took turns flying. They each flew twice, with Wilbur's last flight being the most successful, keeping the airplane in the air for a little under a minute. And then they kept improving the design and making it better and better. Now, the airplane had technically been invented and working. However, it didn't really have serious implications, really, till like World War I. It really took off. Before that, it was just this crazy flying machine. Alright, you have a quiz. It's a standard 5-question quiz. 10 points. Go ahead and cruise right through it like you might cruise through town with your sweet Model T. And then let me know if you have any questions. Alright, that's it for today. Have a good one.